Morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt. I am broadcasting from Nashville, Tennessee this morning where the Republican governors are gathering. We will have a few of them this morning, a few more tomorrow morning, and in between I'm talking to all of them about how the absolute continuation of federalism depends upon their doing the pushback, the immediate and necessary pushback. The big headline of yesterday is that Cyrus Vance II has opened a criminal grand jury in New York aimed at former President Trump. The former president put out the statement yesterday that this is a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in American history. No other president in history has had to put up with what I've had to, and on top of that, I've done a great job for our country, whether it's taxes, regulations, our military veterans, Space Force, our borders, speedy creation of a great vaccine, said to be a miracle in protecting the Second Amendment. This is purely political. And an affront to the almost 75 million voters who supported me in the presidential election. It's being driven by highly partisan Democratic prosecutors. Till I read the former president's statement, I was going to tell you can't really draw any conclusions from the convening of the grand jury, but I have to assume he got a target letter of some sort. Otherwise, okay, he's got a criminal grand jury. You know, it could be about anybody in the Trump organization. Could be about some accountant stealing $1 million. You just can't assume anything about a grand jury convening. But the president sort of took that opportunity away from us. Speaking of record vaccine, I do have to begin the show this morning because former President Obama spoke yesterday, just like former President Trump spoke yesterday, and I cover former presidents. Cut number 3.
Here's the good news, is unlike a lot of the issues that I dealt with during my presidency, including some that still appear on the front pages of the news today, like the Middle East and trying to achieve peace there. This is one where we actually have a solution right before us, thanks to human ingenuity, long-term investments we've made in science and medicine. We were able to, in an unprecedented fashion, come up with a vaccine that is on point.
Wait, just stop everything. Just stop everything. This is the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. We're still involved in the Middle East. No, actually, the Abraham Accords occurred after you left, Mr. President, because you screwed up the Middle East badly. But then, thanks to human ingenuity and long-term investments we made in science, we were able to come up with a vaccine. The we there is truly expansive because the virus didn't exist when President Obama left office. And President Trump gets all the credit. But I love the fact that President Obama is reaching for it because, you can't really go from Obama to Biden without mentioning the fact that, well, Trump did that and Trump's team did that in Operation Warp Speed, as Dr. Collins said on the show a couple of weeks ago. Trump gets credit for that, as does Alex Azar. But I just find it amazing. He really, in his own mind, I think he believes that he advanced peace in the Middle East and that he made the long-term investments in science that made this happen. We are just very, I guess in a taxpayer sense, he pays taxes, so it's we. But now, look, I don't normally do this, but first I have to condemn a rumor. A rumor in Axios this morning is that Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti is going to be named the ambassador to India. That would be a travesty. He has a homeless crisis on his hands. He has promised the federal district court out there, David Carter, which is overseeing the lawsuit, that he's taking rapid action. In fact, I've always suspected all of his dodges. I went to that hearing in Skid Row in February. I've always expected all of Eric Garcetti's dodges were about getting out of town before the hammer came down and took all the money away from him and took control because he's an incompetent and, frankly, uncaring. He simply cannot care. If you see what is going on there, you can't care. And you can't believe he cares. And he's going to skip town. Now, the other thing I don't normally do is read you my column. But last night I posted a column at the Washington Post, which has got quite a lot of response. And so I want to read it to you because it's very important that you go and join the Alliance Defending Freedom. And they are a sponsor of the show, but they're not sponsoring this appeal. I need you to be a part of ADF right now for a very simple reason, that the abortion is back in front of the Supreme Court. And as it is in front of the Supreme Court, we need you to go and join adflegal.org/Hugh. because this is the moment I've been waiting for my entire adult life, 1973. Well, let me read you the column. The landmark Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision establishing the right of abortion arrived in January of 1973. It happened during a month of milestones in a long season of American convulsions. Former President Lyndon Johnson died the same day Roe was handed down, 2 days after Richard Nixon was sworn in as president for a second term, and a day before Nixon would announce the Paris Peace Accords ending the Vietnam War, or so the country believed. For 5+ years, riots and protests, assassinations, and cultural upheaval had divided the United States as it had not been divided since the Civil War. The hope that the announcement of peace in Vietnam would restore calm to the country was misplaced. The Roe decision guaranteed that the country's divisions would deepen. Now, nearly a half-century later, the Supreme Court has agreed to take up a case that could finally undo Roe's vast expansion of the judiciary's power. But such hopes have been disappointed in the past. President Ronald Reagan, whose 1980 election was aided by a pro-life movement responding to Roe, appointed Supreme Court Justices Sandra Day O'Connor, Antonin Scalia, and Anthony Kennedy, raising expectations that the court would repudiate its overreach. Those hopes rose higher when another Republican president and Reagan's successor, George H.W. Bush, appointed Justices David Souter and Clarence Thomas. Then came the stunning Planned Parenthood v. Casey ruling in 1992. Far from going back to judging instead of legislating, the court, led by a joint opinion from O'Connor, Kennedy, and Souter, invented from whole cloth a risible new test for abortion legislation and whether it would place an undue burden on women seeking abortions. Roe had been the first breach of the court's banks of appropriate authority. This ruling was a second, even greater assertion of judicial power, and it set a pattern for decades to come. The court's already gathering of ultimate authority across those years was described in 2015 by Scalia as, quote, the practice of constitutional revision by an unelected committee of 9, always accompanied as it is today by an extravagant praise of liberty. Scalia spoke for tens of millions of Americans when he also wrote that, quote, the ruler of 320 million Americans coast to coast is a majority of the 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court. The court's expedition to areas long reserved to legislatures was as necessary as they were fraught, no matter an individual's beliefs. In 1973, many states were already moving through legislative action towards revisions of laws governing reproductive rights, just as they were on same-sex marriage in 2015. It was the court's ruling on this subject that prompted Scalia's thundering appraisal above of the justices' undoing of the constitutional order generally. The dissension and acidity in the court's opinions in these cases are reflected throughout the politics of the period since Roe. If the Supreme Court has become the supreme legislature and executive as well as judiciary, what point is there in state politics and much of congressional deliberations as well? To simply tax and spend? Now perhaps the court will finally come to grips with the consequences of that unconstitutional ambition to be the decider-in-chief of all divisive issues. In deciding to hear a case next fall involving a Mississippi law that bans most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, Roe drew the line at 6 months. The court will, in effect, weigh the rights of states to establish their own abortion laws without regard for Roe and Casey. Defenders of Roe and Casey praise stare decisis, ruling according to precedent, but as Chief Justice Roberts explained in his concurring opinion in Citizens United in 2010, the greatest purpose of the doctrine of precedent is to serve a constitutional ideal, the rule of law. Roberts continued, it follows that in unusual circumstances, when fidelity to any particular precedent does more damage this constitutional ideal than to advance it, we must be willing to depart from that precedent. Roberts pointed to, among other things, the example of the ruling of Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, overruling the ruling of Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 of separate but equal. Terrible decisions must be struck from the books, even if they have set the law for more than 50 years. Immense damage has been done by Roe and Casey to the ideas of self-government, federalism, and the rule of law. The debate over abortion, unlike that about same-sex marriage, was not widely and quickly settled, but has only grown deeper and more divisive. Roe and Casey should be overturned, and the issues of abortion rights returned to the states from which they were ripped in 73. The repudiation of those cases should be accompanied by an admission of error and the limits of the court's power to adjudicate every or even most debates. The sunk costs of 5 decades of judicial misadventure do not oblige the court to continue in error. That column is on the front page of the Washington Post landing page right now. Send it everywhere. And please go to adflegal.org/Hugh. That's adflegal.org/Hugh. Get involved in getting these cases reversed and come right back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt from Nashville. I'm joined by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. Governor DeWine, good to see you in person, out and about in a gathering of people without masks on.
It is wonderful, Hugh. Good to see you in person, and it was good to see everybody yesterday at the RGA meeting and in person, people we haven't seen for a long time. You know,
I think you got 30 governors here, don't you?
Yeah, it's a large number, and you know, Republican governors talk to each other a lot, and so I've been on a lot of conference calls over the last 15 months, but not in person with my fellow Republican governors. So anyway, it was good to see them.
Well, I've got lots to talk to you about this segment next. Let me start with, of course, the practical and most important thing. Will the Browns be at full capacity in the fall?
Yes.
And will the Bengals?
Yes.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
How's that for good news?
I
forgot. You're Warren, you're Brown. You know, I get it.
We want Joe Burrows to have no crowd support whatsoever. So do you think Ohio's back to normal?
Yeah, I think pretty much. Our unemployment level is about what it was when we went into the pandemic. I think you're seeing people, feel good moving forward, and we have one of the challenges that we're seeing across the country, I guess, and that is people, businesses, men and women are looking for employees. We got help wanted ads up all over the place. Some of our restaurants, you stop at a Wendy's or you stop at a McDonald's, and it's not open. I mean, the drive-thru's open, but the inside is not open. So I think it seems to be a problem, across the country.
Yeah,
but that, I suppose that's we're coming out of this thing, and we feel good where we are as a state.
I've got two sponsors. One is joinjcn.com, the Job Creators Network. They're out there trying to get impediments to employment closed. And I've got andrewandtodd.com. They're mortgage brokers. They try mortgage financiers. They try to get people houses. What is the unemployment rate in Ohio? And what is the availability of housing right now? Because those are the two biggest indicators of recovery, in my view, housing and employment.
Yeah, unemployment's, Lisa, 4.6, 4.7,
Wow.
4.7. As far as housing, the thing that we hear all the time from people we know, from friends, just from talking around the state, is housing markets in most parts of Ohio are just really hot. I mean, they're crazy hot. Somebody wants to go buy a house. A young man that works for me tried to buy a house, and he said he bid. It's a bid. They're starting to bid on it. He said I bid $10,000 more than the asking price. He said they laughed at me. So it's that's one of the things that certainly you see going on today.
4.6%. That's the job shortage. When you ran for governor, what was the unemployment? Because we've been through a pandemic. I actually thought it would be about 7 to 8%.
No, it's I don't know what it was on election day, but when we went into this pandemic, it was almost identical to what it is now. So that was about. So we're in many respects we're back back to normal.
Have schools reopened to your satisfaction across the state?
Yeah, something we did, Hugh, that was different, I think, than some other states. It became apparent to me in December and January that some of our urban schools were simply not going to go back to in person. And so we made them a deal. And we made a deal. We have 630 some school districts, and we said this to every school district. If you sign a piece of paper and tell us that you'll be back in by March 1, we will vaccinate anybody in your school. Every school but one signed. Almost all of them hit the deadline of March 1. We had a couple stragglers. We had to kind of have a little conversation with them. But by the end of March, everybody except one school district was back in person. Also, Hugh, during this whole period of time, we had many schools that never closed. In other words, they were in person the entire year. We left it up. In Ohio, as you know, we are a very local government state. We believe people at the local community can make their own decisions. And so we left it up to our schools, whether they were in person totally, whether they were hybrid, and in other words, in person sometimes during the week, couple days a week, and remote the rest, or whether they're totally remote. And so we saw schools made those choices. Sometimes we saw schools having to close down because of the spread of the COVID. But by and large, we had a lot of schools that stayed open the entire time. But many of the urban schools, we started hearing, and not just the urban schools, but other schools, we started hearing from parents, from teachers, from others in regard to kind of the harm that was being done to children by not being in person.
Hold that thought, Governor. We're going to go to break and come back. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. Back, America. Hugh Hewitt in Nashville. Sitting across from me, Ohio's Governor Mike DeWine. I think the most successful governor over the last year in a situation for which success cannot really be defined because it was terrible anyway. The pandemic was terrible. But, Governor, I have a big question for you, and you're the perfect person to start off with. You have been a state legislator. You have been the lieutenant governor. You've been a United States senator, the attorney general, and now the governor. So you've done it all at every level of government, and a local official, if I recall correctly.
County prosecutor.
County prosecutor.
My first job. It was a great job. Loved it.
So
Loved every
I
minute
have
of it.
told everyone that federalism is sort of at risk in the United States, and there's probably no one better to ask than you about the advantage of that system and where you think we are when it comes to federalism. Coming through a pandemic, what do you think?
You know, it's kind of interesting, Hugh, talking to people here at the Republican Governors Association meeting. These are people, average citizens who just come here. They want to contribute. They want to help. They want to be part of it. They do that because they think the action is at the state level. And if you look at Republican governors, I think you see a group of people who are focused every day on governing, making things happen, trying to keep taxes down, keeping regulations down, and focusing on growing the economy. So I think that, you know, I come from Ohio, obviously grew up in Ohio, started, as you indicated, at the county level, and I just think local government is best. And if we can keep it local, where it's close to the people, we're much better off. And I think we've got a great group of Republican governors who are out there working every single day. I think it's always, in answer to your question, though, I think federalism is always at risk. And I think it's much more at risk, bluntly, when you have Democrats, controlling Congress, Democrats controlling the White House. I don't think they appreciate, how federalism is so very, very, very important. And look, during this pandemic, as I indicated earlier, one of the great things was being able to get on the phone, talk to other governors, and see, hey, how are you doing it? I mean, literally, the laboratories, the 50 laboratories, the 51 laboratories of democracy, and everyone's doing different things, but you can see what works and see what does not work by frankly talking to your fellow governors. I mean, that's how I approach it, at least. And
your advantage and disadvantage was to get to the belt early. You were the first governor to actually sound the alarm on this, and I was covering it extensively from inside the Beltway. But there are 51 different governors to evaluate. None of them intended to do anything wrong, right? No one intended for the virus to spread. And I keep telling that. Let's just attribute good faith to everyone. But there were people who did well like you, and there's some people who didn't do so well, who had bad mistakes. And I'm just not going to name names on that. But generally, nobody intended to do a bad job. But did the federal government get in your way, or did it help you? Or is that a mixed answer? It's possible that they did both.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll be very honest, Hugh. In regard to the pandemic, we had a very good relationship with the Trump administration. We've had a good relationship with the Biden administration. I don't have a complaint with either administrations in regard to this. I mean, I'll tell you a little story, and when I think about it, I can't believe I did it, but we had a situation where we couldn't get the N95 mask. These were the masks. The hospitals couldn't get them, and nursing homes couldn't get them. It was just horrible. The supply chain out of China was a nightmare. I could tell you stories about that. That curl your hair, unbelievable. So we have a nonprofit company, Research Battelle Labs in Columbus, and they're huge. They do amazing work. It came up with a plan, a way to sanitize masks, and we were having trouble getting it. We were very excited about it, having trouble getting the FDA to get it approved, and we kept hearing from them, it's going to get approved, it's going to get approved, it's going to get approved. So I finally, literally Sunday morning, I pick up the phone and call the White House and call for President Trump. I can't believe I did. Sunday morning, calling the president. He calls me back in an hour and he says, "Okay, we'll get on. Let's see what we can get done."
I remember that.
By evening, my Lieutenant Governor John Husted was on, who had bird dogging this for us. He was on the phone with the FDA and the right people and Battelle, and it got done, and we moved on. So had a good relationship. We can talk about in the Biden administration and the size of the spending. And, you and I, I'm sure, have the kind of same opinions in regard to the magnitude of some of these bills and, concern that we have going forward with inflation and other things. But as far as the virus itself and getting the vaccine out, no, they've been just fine to work with.
Well, I want to ask you now about the reason I bring up federalism is just the overarching question of the pandemic response, but also because Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood are back before the Supreme Court. And I have a column in the Washington Post today saying those should be vacated, those judgments should be overturned, governors should be allowed to decide with their state legislature. You signed the heartbeat bill. Do you think there's a chance that this Supreme Court will strike down Roe and Casey?
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, I clearly, as you know, as a court watcher, you watch the court, and when they take a case, there's a signal there. Sometimes you don't read the signal or you don't understand it, but, they could have passed that case. They could have passed these cases. There's no, reason they have to take an abortion case. And so they did take that case. And so one would think that, there's a majority on that court that thinks that this needs to be examined. And
where's the heartbeat bill? Is it enjoined or is it?
Yeah. I mean, we knew when we signed it. It was one of the first ththings that I did is sign the heartbeat bill. And look, I am, throughout my career and throughout my life, I don't think there's protecting human life is just what we need to be doing.
You're the equal of any elected official on the issue.
Yeah, we just need to be protecting human life. I mean, when I went through the pandemic, what am I thinking about? How do we protect human life? How do we keep things moving forward? But how do we protect human life? Same thing in regard to, the abortion issue. So I signed, had no hesitancy at all about signing the heartbeat bill when it was passed by early on in our administration. But we knew when we signed it that the district court would just enjoin it. But that, we knew that. And we knew that eventually what we thought was eventually our case or somebody's case is going to get to the Supreme Court if the makeup of the Supreme Court changed, and it did. So that's kind of
federalism. Ohio wants a heartbeat bill. I think Ohio ought to be allowed to have a heartbeat bill. I think Ohio ought to be allowed to regulate its natural resources. Ohio takes care of its Great Lake water very carefully. I know Lake Erie's doing well, but when I talk about federalism, you had the Trump years, which were deregulation central. When you were in the Senate, you fought for deregulation. Have you started to see the fingers of the federal government extend again to grasp parts of Ohio's government that they really ought to just leave alone?
Yeah, I don't know if I've got any specific examples about that yet. We're still early on. But, it is something that anytime you get, frankly, a Democrat administration, they're just more inclined to do that than a Republican administration.
H.R. 1 would take election law out of your hands. Senate 1 would. What do you think of that? And what do you think of Ohio's election integrity? I thought it was very good, but I wanted to hear from you. And do we need reform there?
Yeah, Hugh, it's an interesting story when people talk about election reform, and Ohio has very, very open voting in the sense, and secure voting. And the way we do it, of course, is we have a Secretary of State who's elected. And quite candidly, Democrat and Republican secretaries of state in the past have done, by and large, a very, very good job. When it goes down to the county level, as you know, the election board is Republican, Democrat. When you go to the precinct, guess who's sitting there? It's Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones, and some of them have been there for years. We got Democrats, we got Republicans. Everybody's watching everybody, and it works exceedingly well as far as security is concerned. As far as openness in voting and ability to vote, Hugh, we can vote. People in Ohio can vote absentee for no reason for 4 weeks. Prior to the election. For 4 weeks, they can go into their local board of elections and vote in person if they want to. So, and then there's the 13 hours on election day from 6:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night that they can go in to vote. So we have very, very great opportunities for people to vote in Ohio. So I'm prejudiced, but I think we do it exceedingly well in Ohio.
I also think you cleaned up the rolls on a regular basis, which is important because I once voted there and I don't vote there anymore. In California, I continue to get ballots sent to my home where I haven't lived for 5 years. So that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a balance. There's a balance between making it easy to vote. I mean, as our Secretary of State Frank LaRose says, and my Lieutenant Governor, who used to be Secretary of State, John Husted says, easy to vote, hard to cheat. I mean, it's kind of simple, but it's what we all ought to be striving for. And so when we look at this, and we talk about federal government doing something in this area, and I'll be honest with you, I'm focused on what I'm focused on. I'm not focused on that federal bill, but we don't think there's really a need for the federal government to come in and tell us what to do in regard to elections. I mean, and there's searching, that in the case of Ohio, and all I can speak about is Ohio, but in the case of Ohio, it would be, trying to find a problem. There's no problem.
So actually, Ohio is. People think I'm just a hometowner here, but it's truly.
Well, you are a little bit.
But it's truly coming out of this better than anyone. But the biggest problem, and I ask all the governors about federalism and about how they're going to get people back to work. So let me close by talking to you. How are you going to get people back to work?
Hugh, the most important thing that government can do when we talk about the economy, jobs, getting people to work. I think it really comes down to education, and education written very large in the sense of, so early childhood development, very, 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 very important. We've dramatically expanded a home visiting program, which basically you get an at-risk mother, and she's going to have a baby, making sure that she gets the help that she needs before that baby's born, so that child is a regular birth weight baby. We don't start that child off with a problem. We put a lot of emphasis on that. In regard to job training, we have a program where we work directly with companies, and if a worker needs to upskill their industry, what we call their industry level credential, so that they can get an additional certificate. So you take someone from this one level and take them up to a higher level. We pay for results. We will pay if they get that certificate. We won't pay for the process, but once it's done and they got that certificate, we will then pay. Been extremely successful, and we're continuing to expand that program. So I think when you look at what is government's role, it is to provide education. We're also, as a very much a choice state in regard to people making their decisions about where their kids go to school. But if you look at education, that's the one thing that we can make sure that we are providing so that people have the opportunity to live to their full potential. I believe the Republican Party is all about opportunity. I define it as freedom, opportunity, and whatever we can do to make sure every single Ohioan has the opportunity to advance, the opportunity to live up to their God-given potential, is the way I describe it, and that's really what we focus on, every single day. And then it's up, of course, to that individual. But if you're talking about jobs, if you're talking about moving the state forward. And just one anecdote, I know you got to go, but Jobs Ohio is a nonprofit in the state of Ohio that the Kasich administration created in the legislature, and it works exceedingly well. It basically does a lot of our economic development. It's nonprofit, set off from the state. We work very closely. I recommended the person to head it up, Bob Smith, who heads up the board, and JP Nassif, who is the executive director. So we work closely. I was on the phone with them yesterday, doing a great job. But I'll tell you, in talking to companies that either are already in Ohio and want to expand, or companies that are thinking about coming into Ohio or some other state, the thing that is always the most important is, can I find workers who have the talent to do what I need to have done? Is there a supply of workers? And companies will tell us, look, certain level, they have to be at a certain level. We'll train them, and we work out deals with these companies. So we help pay for the training. But that talent pool is the breaker. If you don't have that talent pool, we were talking to a company a year ago, and it would be a company that you know very, very well, about expanding in Ohio. And when we got right down to it, the question ultimately was, can we get enough engineers? Can we get enough scientists? And thank heavens, the answer came back. Yes, Case Western Reserve is there. We have other great institutions, Ohio State, we have Miami, we have UC, and on and on and on. And they came back with, yeah, we've done the analysis, and we think that there are enough there. So what that tells me as a governor is, I better make sure that we always continue to focus on how many people do we have in this sector? How many people do we have with these skills? And if we're not getting enough, we've got to really put an additional emphasis on that and make sure that we're doing. That's what government can do, and it's a you can't get these companies to come if they don't think they can get the workers. Hugh, you can come up with the best package, the most glorious package. You could give them the most money, but if they ultimately say, I don't think I can find the people.
Yeah, they're not coming.
They're not coming, man. They're not coming. So that's what our focus is education written very, very large in that sense.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, great to see you. Congratulations. I'll see you at a Browns-Bengals game. We'll sit on opposite sides of the field, and that's the only time we'll disagree.
All right.
Good to see you, Governor.
Good to see you. Appreciate it. Have a good day today.
Thank you. How are you, Governor?
I'm doing very well. It's good to be with you, Hugh.
It's good to be with you, and I want to talk to you for a bit. Some of this is on air, some of it is off, but we'll put it all together in a package later. Montana. And I was just talking to Mike DeWine about the different states and federalism. So I want your 2 cents on this. You've been a congressman and now you're a governor. Is the federal government out of its box?
Yes. And I mean, our 10th Amendment's very clear. It said rights not explicitly granted to the federal government are reserved for the states and the people. And yet we have the feds telling us how to manage our wildlife, how to manage our lands. That's not anywhere in the Constitution. So I think that the governors are really the last line of defense against this federal overreach. This is one of the biggest issues I deal with in Montana.
Now, it first manifested itself in the course of the pandemic. And so you got elected governor just as this thing arrived. Were they helpful to you? Were they hurtful to you? Or did they not matter?
Well, I would say the Warp Speed project gave us a vaccine that allowed us to brighten the light at the end of the tunnel. That was great. But then we saw the Biden administration come in and immediately shut down the Keystone XL pipeline, which honestly, it was a lifeline for eastern Montana. I had individual counties that if the pipeline had gone forward, their revenue in the county would have gone up 50%. I had local electric co-ops that just the load to one pumping station would have quadrupled the load on the network. And according to the folks there at the Big Flat Electric Co-op up in Phillips County, that revenue would have allowed them to rebuild the electric grid across 3 counties. The revenue. I had local business folks that had invested over $1 million in hotel properties in anticipation of these jobs. One contractor did not hire 1,000 people. So this is misguided, it's intrusive, and it's unwelcome.
And how long until you get some relief? Is there a legal challenge to somehow reverse the cancellation of a pipeline that has been okay? People have relied on it. You know about reliance damages. I think of all these hoteliers. Is there any legal action can oblige the reissuance of that permit?
We are pursuing that. I'm working in conjunction with our Attorney General to see what relief we can. It's just this misguided approach that's costing Montanans their jobs, their livelihoods, and possibly even the strength of the local communities.
So let me talk to you a little bit about the other case. I have a Washington Post column up this morning on the case that the Supreme Court has taken. I asked Mike DeWine about this too, on abortion. And Mike said, rightly, they don't take a case unless they want to talk about it. I know you're pro-life governor. What do you think? Are they going to back off? Are they going to let the states decide their own laws when it comes to reproductive rights and the unborn?
Well, I'm not sure what the Supreme Court's going to do. I do know that life is precious and it should be protected. That's why I was pleased in this last legislative session. I was able to sign 5 pro-life bills into law in Montana. We moved the ball down the field in an incremental way. We passed a pain-capable bill. We outlawed tele-abortions, so you can't do chemical abortions through the mail without a doctor being in attendance. We require ultrasounds offered to a woman before she can complete. She doesn't have to look at it, but it has to be offered. We defunded Planned Parenthood in Montana. And so we're making steps in Montana to protect life.
I'm coming right back at the top of the hour with Governor Greg Gianforte of Montana. Don't go anywhere, America. We'll be right back after the news, weather, and local traffic. Stay tuned. You're listening to Hugh Hewitt Show from Nashville and the Republican Governors Association. America, bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. Wherever you are, I'm in Nashville talking to governors because the Republican Governors Association is gathered here at the bottom of the hour. Doug Ducey, their chairman, will be joining me. Alaska Governor Dunleavy, who I've never met or talked to, is coming in at the end of the show. But with me right now is Greg Gianforte. He's the governor of Montana, former congressman, his lovely wife and team. Governor, I want to ask, is Montana open for business? Can people go back up and fish at the Madison?
The fish are rising and the mountains are beautiful. You're all welcome.
Are the hotels open? Will they find a place to stay?
Yes, they will. And we are ready. I was out. When I took office in January, we unwound these impractical restrictions. We got rid of all the capacity limits, hours of operations. We got rid of the mask mandate, enjoying the open space. We put liability protection in place for all our small businesses against COVID lawsuits. But then the problem was getting back to work. Some outfits, small businesses, couldn't find workers because we were paying them $42,000 a year to stay at home. So we were the first state in the country to remove the supplemental unemployment benefits. And I'll tell you, I was talking to a hotel owner in Helena recently, just last week, and they had been advertising for folks, couldn't find them. The manager was doing laundry and cleaning rooms because he couldn't get help. We made this change, getting rid of the supplemental benefits. We even put in a back-to-work bonus to incent people off of unemployment. In the next week after we made that change, that hotel had 60 resumes submitted. So we were talking about this in the break. Incentives matter. We went from a no-work incentive to a back-to-work incentive, and we're ready for our visitors to come. And let me just say, people, you're welcome. You should come. Get a line wet, tour Glacier Park, come to Yellowstone. Don't be trapped in those concrete jungles. Come to Montana in open space.
We have a mutual friend, Jan Genera, and he runs the Wild Adventure, TWA.US, up in Ennis, and a restaurant, the Continental Divide, and they're jammed. Everything is, so people are coming back. To what do you attribute that in terms of your vaccination policy? You were telling me during the break, you're just making them widely available everywhere.
Yeah, well, we changed. When I took over, we had a the CDC guidelines were terrible. They prioritized criminals in jail ahead of our seniors. They prioritized lawyers in charge. So
lawyers are important, Governor.
Yeah, at some level. So we got rid of all that, and we went to a very simple policy in January. We said, listen, this vaccine is the light at the end of the tunnel. It's safe and effective. Let's make it available to people who are in danger of complications or death. Very simple distribution policy, and it made it easier to administer. So we have, very high percentage of our seniors that are now vaccinated. We saw new infections come down, hospitalizations come down significantly, and now we're shifting from, we had more of a supply-constrained situation to now we've seen a little softening in demand. So we're trying to take the friction out of the system and make the vaccines available where the people are. So we're in bank lobbies, we're at truck stops, we're in large employers, so that it's a convenient thing to do.
Now, Governor, we have another friend, Foster Freeze, and you and I last saw each other and your wife in the backyard of your house on the river when we were doing an ACE scholarship fundraiser. Then I flew over Yellowstone in Foster's plane to do one for Foster in Wyoming. How's he doing, and how's ACE doing?
Well, Foster, anytime you interact with Foster, your day is brighter. He's an awesome, bright light in everyone's life that he touches. And I just think back of all the things he's done. He has such a big heart for folks, and he's never been afraid of putting his money where his mouth is in terms of charitable causes, philanthropy. Foster's in his last chapter, and our prayers are with him as he goes through this. But I had talked to him on the phone recently. I was up in Montana and had a chance to visit with him and on the phone, and he's finishing well.
Well, he's a great inspiration, and you're right. Every time you see Foster, you're better off for it, and you're usually happier, and you have a load of terrible jokes to take with you wherever you're going. So, Foster, wherever you are, we're thinking about you. Now, let's talk about election integrity, Governor. I'm going to ask all the governors this, because the callers yesterday said, what do you want me to ask the governors? And, of course, the lines lit up with the people who are still upset over the election in 2020. I personally don't believe that any state had fraud sufficient to overturn the result, but a lot of people still want election reform done. What do you think about Montana, and what do you think about H.R. 1 and S1, which would take the authority of elections away from governors, secretaries of state, and state legislatures?
Well, H.R. 1's a bad idea. When I was in Congress, I voted against it, and it's just a ridiculous piece of legislation. It is a federal takeover. It looks at taxpayer-funded federal elections. It mandates same-day voter registration. It removes requirements for ID. I mean, you just go down. It's a laundry list of progressive ideas. We took specific steps in Montana. We just finished our legislative session. Our legislators are there for 90 days every 2 years. I signed 550 bills into law during just so far this year, and we signed 3 bills related to election integrity. We outlawed same-day voter registration in Montana. We now require photo IDs to vote in Montana. And we passed a law that says we have to regularly update the voter rolls to make sure that dead people aren't on there or people that have left the state.
Well, that makes perfect sense. You also passed a RFRA, a Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Tell me about that, because that had come to my attention before you sat down. You'd done something on religious liberty.
Yeah, and this was important. We mirrored what the federal government had done on a very bipartisan basis to say, listen, our First Amendment matters. You have the right to express your deeply held beliefs, and it is there to protect not any one group. It's to protect everybody from the government, which is the whole point of the Constitution.
Now, Governor Gianforte, I also told people yesterday that my number one question is education. We got about 3 minutes. What are you doing about education? What are you doing about charter schools? What are you doing about choice?
Yeah, so I've been involved in parental choice in education a long time. I served on the Milton Friedman Board, now Ed Choice, and I was proud to sign into law our first significant piece of parental choice legislation in Montana, the Big Sky Scholarship Act. Now, if you're willing to write a check to a scholarship granting organization for low-income kids, you get a 100% tax credit in Montana, up to $200,000 per person. To allow lower-income kids to go to the school of their choice.
How much?
Up to $200,000 per person, up to a cap. There is a cap because we have budget constraints, but we're hoping to increase that over time. In addition, Montana, unfortunately, was 50th in the country in starting teacher pay. So one of my priorities in our budget, we didn't put a lot of new things in the budget. We kept the overall budget to less than 1% growth. We provided $120 million of tax reductions. We cut $145 million in spending out of the budget. But we did put money in that incents local school boards to increase starting teacher pay in our public schools as well, because,
incentives matter.
Incentives matter.
Yeah. If you want people to come and teach in your schools, you have to pay them. Is it easy for Hillsdale to open a Hillsdale charter school? Is it easy for people to come into the state, or is it still a difficulty and a labyrinth?
We have we don't have a broad-based charter law at this point. We do have one. It's limited, but we have a vibrant independent school network in the state. I was chairman of a classical Christian school for 14 years in Bozeman. That's where my children went. And unfortunately, people of means have school choice.
Right.
So this is really about helping low-income kids. And I think our goal for all of our kids, whether they're in public school, independent school, homeschool, has got to be to help every child reach their full potential. And a one-size-fits-all just doesn't work.
Last question, Governor. How do you get your revenue? Yesterday I was driving in. Dion was driving me from the airport. And he said, Tennessee doesn't have an income tax. I said, I'm very aware Tennessee doesn't have an income tax because everyone in California is moving to Tennessee. But he didn't know how they actually raise their money. What's the income tax in Montana? How do you guys get your revenue? I'm fascinated by different states, different approaches.
Yeah, so this is, we have a three-legged stool in Montana. It's income tax, property tax, and historically it's been natural resources revenue. So we are a resource-rich state, minerals, coal, timber. I'm the first Republican governor in 16 years. So the prior administrations had.
Any Supreme Court justices, call me. I'll get into the bar. Just call me and I'll move up there.
We could use you there. In fact, we blew up the whole way we select judges in Montana because it was rigged by the trial lawyers.
Well, I'm only in the California and D.C. bars, so we'll have to make an exemption. But I'll come live in.
Yeah, you'd be welcome.
But 30 seconds, you were going to tell us what did you cut? If you have a three-legged stool, which stool?
Well, what we did was we brought down personal income tax rate. We have a business equipment tax. We tripled the exemption. We provided some broad-based property tax relief. And basically the way we did it was we held the line on new spending.
Greg Gianforte, good to have you back. Congratulations on a great first year as governor and continued success with the pandemic and with Montana.
Yeah, come see us in Montana.
I'll be back. You betcha. Take care. I'll be right back, America. Nashville. Hugh Hewitt Show will return. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt from Nashville, the Republican Governors Association, sitting across from my friend Doug Ducey, governor of Arizona, very successful governor of Arizona, and the chairman of the Republican Governors Association. How's your conference going, Governor, after a year of sort of not meeting anywhere?
We're off to a great start. It's sold out, standing room only. I think we originally anticipated 300 people participating. It's at over 700 individuals that are going to be here, and 21 of our 27 Republican governors.
Well, congratulations on that. I'm asking them all, the governors I talked to, the same question. I want to make sure I ask you. And it's an interesting question coming after the pandemic. Is federalism working? Did the government at the federal level help, hinder, or simply not a factor in your pandemic response and across the board?
Well, I would say federalism is working. When we were going through the pandemic, say a year ago at this time, Arizona was not yet in the thick of it. Yet if you look at New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, they were really in the barrel. We would do this conference call every Thursday night that I would host. All the Republican governors would participate, and Charlie Baker from Massachusetts would tell us what was going on in Massachusetts. It allowed us to prepare and plan ahead in Arizona. So I think as the virus moved throughout the country, it allowed a very large nation to make specific decisions in the best interest of its citizens.
And so at the end of this, is Arizona reopening, in your view?
Oh, Arizona is wide open. We are wide open. We never had a lockdown. Any decisions we made were limited and targeted. We prioritized lives and livelihoods throughout this. If we have any work left to do, it's to make certain we catch our kids up in school. Schools were not shut for public health reasons, but the public did not want to go into public schools. We had those issues around that. So, of course, we've got to get our kids caught up. We know so much more than we did in the February, March, April time frame. And now we want to have those after-hour programs, acceleration programs, one-on-one programs to make sure our kids are at grade level.
So, obviously, no one plans to be governor during a pandemic. What was the worst part of it? What did you learn through this? You've been a business executive, been in government for 14 years now. What was the curveball of curveballs?
Well, I would say the entire thing, there was a real fog of the pandemic in that March, April time frame when President Trump and Vice President Pence went from 30 days to slow the spread, or 15, which turns it into 30. But I think the communication among governors, the responsiveness that we had from the federal government, the fact that we have a vaccine that is widely rolled out. We had the first mass vaccination site in the country at the home of the Arizona Cardinals, State Farm Stadium. Very thankful to the Bidwell family for opening up the stadium, and then other NFL stadiums followed on. And now we're back and reopened. It appears to me that Nashville and Tennessee is open as well. And I'm seeing the baseball stadiums around the country. It looks like we're anywhere between 100% and 85%. So that's about as close as you can get to fully back reopened. And I think you're seeing that pretty much from East Coast to West Coast.
Now, the Cardinals are playing the Browns this year, so we're going to be on opposite sides of that one, Governor Ducey. But I think they're playing actually up at First Energy, not down at Arizona Stadium. In terms of getting people back to work, where are you there? What's the unemployment in Arizona? And are the unemployment benefits, Governor Gianforte was just saying, they were too high in Montana, you had to cut them?
We have more people working in Arizona today than we did in February of 2020. So we're over our 100% of max employment. That's how we have to measure it because our state's growing so fast. There's such a mass exodus from California. We have so many people arriving in our state. I always say we're Chicago's favorite suburbs. People from the Midwest are coming to our state. But we have more people working. We did stop the federal benefits because we've got more jobs available than we have people to fill them. I think we've got 180,000 jobs available. We had about 57,000 people that remained on the unemployment rolls. So we're going to be able to get those people back into work. We think that a job is important. And rather than being like the federal government and paying people to stay home, we're actually going to incent people to work. We're paying a $2,000 bonus for people that accept a full-time job in the next 45 days and a $1,000 bonus to people that accept a part-time job.
Now, that's pretty remarkable. I haven't heard about that in any other state. Is that a first in the country initiative?
I think we probably put that together. Now, because the governors are competitive, but we are very collegial, we do share best practices, sometimes with attribution. I shared that on our last conference call. I think some folks liked it. They wanted to know how we were doing that within the flexible COVID dollars that the federal government had sent out, and I think you might see that in other places as well.
Did the federal government send too much money, and what do you think about another round of stimulus?
We don't need another round of stimulus. For Arizona, they really did send too much money. We're going to make good long-term decisions with the money. The accusation of a blue state bailout in many ways was very accurate. Our state has a $1 billion in its rainy day fund. We've got a record cash carry forward in our general fund. We've got an historic tax cut that we're likely a few days away if our legislature can get it over the finish line. So I think Arizona is going to come out of this pandemic healthy and strong and economically vibrant, but the federal government continues to send these dollars out. It's distorting the economy. I don't know that we know what the unintended consequences are going to be around potential inflation, et cetera, and I think we ought to let the natural dynamism of the American economy take us forward.
Now, Glenn Youngkin's running for governor in Virginia. I'm sure he's here.
He is.
He's been on the radio with me campaigning. Promising.
He was your guy, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, because he's a businessman.
Yeah.
He's like you, and actually will know how to run a government. But he wants to cut a 5.75% income tax because this state, Tennessee, has none, and Florida has none. It just seemed, and my driver yesterday was aware of income tax competition. I think people are hyper aware of taxes when they move.
I think people look to a state that's attractive, where there's economic opportunity and a high quality of life. It's why Arizona's been among the fastest growing states in the country. Maricopa County's been the fastest growing county 4 years running. Our state is booming right now. If we pass this tax cut, we're going to have a 2.5 flat tax across the board. Our top tier tax rate after Prop 208 will be at 4.5%. So it's right there with Texas, Tennessee, and other competitive states. So we're excited about it. I do think Glenn Youngkin would be a big winner for Virginia. You need somebody who's going to focus on the economy, focus on getting these kids back to school. I'm blown away at how they've handled this on the Eastern Seaboard. And then, of course, protecting people's Second Amendment rights, constitutional rights, the things that you'd never think you'd hear about in a state like Virginia.
Now, yesterday I asked all sorts of callers, what do you want me to ask the governors? And many of them said, ask them about election integrity. Now, I think Arizona's got good system because I'm from California, which has a ridiculous system. I'm still getting ballots mailed to me at my old California address. Do you need overhaul of election laws in Arizona?
I don't know that we need overhaul. One thing we've done well in Arizona is we've reformed nearly every cycle since 1993. We were one of the pioneering states on mail-in voting, and we've been doing it well since 1993. We have nearly 80% of our citizens that choose to vote by mail. So we did do some things like make sure that our lists are active and administratively clean, make certain that dollars from people like Mark Zuckerberg are not going to come in and affect the election or the Secretary of State's office, and then also make sure that there's a real check and a balance between the governor's office and the Secretary of State's office. So you could not have an activist election manager inside that office, and we haven't had that, and I don't think we'll have that going forward.
I also told them my number one topic, and I want to ask you, Doug Ducey, is education. Now, you are a charter school heaven. You have a tax credit for people who want to put money into schools. How is that going, and did the public schools react as well as you expected them to this time around?
Well, Arizona leads the nation in school choice. We have over 500 charter schools in our state. That's over 200,000 children in the state of Arizona. Nearly 20% of our kids there are in those charter schools. If you take that as a state, that's the number one state in the nation in terms of economic achievement. Our charters did a great job during the pandemic. They were back to school sooner, getting their kids up to grade level faster. We had certainly some heroic episodes with our public districts as well. We had some that stayed virtual longer than I believe they needed to stay virtual, or longer than public health said they needed to stay virtual. And places like Great Hearts, which is a great place in which to go to school. If Jack, Joe, and Sam Ducey were back at kindergarten level rather than going to Catholic school, they'd be going to Great Hearts. It's got an 11,000 kid wait list. Parents are voting with their feet. They know the rigor and excellence of these educations, and there's other quality charters all across the state of Arizona. It's made our public districts better as well. Arizona kids are leading the nation in improvement in math and in reading, but we need more of that kind of healthy competition and making certain that our kids are getting the education that they need.
So with 2 years left in Arizona, and we got 3 minutes, what do you want to get done that you haven't gotten done?
Well, I want to really take advantage of all the economic momentum that we have. I heard you mentioned Taiwan Semi a few days ago, and of course we signed the Samsung deal, the largest semiconductor deal in the country.
Where's that being built, by the way?
That's being built out in East Chandler.
Okay.
And it's just incredible what's happened out there. The companies, the headquarters, the distribution, the supply chain that Arizona is enjoying right now, the electric vehicles that we're bringing, Lucid, Nikola, Electrica, Mechanica. So I want to really maximize that. I've given a lot of thanks to Jerry Brown as my partner in economic development. Gavin Newsom's proving even better. So to continue to keep our foot on the pedal there, of course I want to get this tax reform done. I'd like to expand educational choice and savings accounts in Arizona. And I've got some ideas around how to make our ballot more productive as well around this initiative process. There's a lot left to do. There's a learning curve as a governor. We've got a lot of momentum. Arizona's in a great spot, and I intend to finish strong not only in the governor's office, but I'm honored that my peers have asked me to lead the RGA. We've got 38 governor's races across the country, including places like Florida and Georgia, Texas, and Ohio, even the state of Arizona. I'm going to care a lot about who my successor is. And then we've got pickup opportunities for the RGA in places like Maine and Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Kansas, and New Mexico. We want to take advantage of all those.
Are you in charge of candidate recruitment for those like Rick Scott is for the Senate?
You bet
campaign?
I am. It's one of the best parts of the job.
Who are you finding up in Maine? I got family in Maine.
Well, I think we might have a return of Paul LePage.
Oh, okay.
And we've got some great possibilities in Michigan too. Of course, John James, the Naval Academy. We're hoping John would consider it, and then we've got James Craig, who is the chief of police of
Detroit.
In Detroit, born and raised, beat cop in Los Angeles for 20 years. He said to the mayor he was thinking about running for governor, and the governor said, well, why would a Democrat run against a Democratic governor? And he goes, what makes you think I'm a Democrat? So he's out of central casting, and we're hopeful we're going to have strong fields across the country.
Any chance of anyone in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, you sure would think. It's about the candidate. You know, the candidate matters, and when I look at states like Oregon and Washington, you would think there would be an opening. Is there any chance that Hugh Hewitt's going to relocate to the...
No. I'm never doing what you did. I think I salute you for doing it. I salute all your governors for doing it. Thanks for putting this together and arranging for me to be here. It's great to
see you, Hugh.
We'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Back, America, and especially the Copper River Valley, where I'm being heard in the Anchorage, Alaska area right now. I've got your governor. Governor Dunleavy is with me. Governor, normally I know all the governors. We have not met before. It's great to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show for the first time.
It's great to be here, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
Love your state. I was just telling you during the break, I've been on cruise ships up there before. I've been to Denali. Are you open for business? Can people come to Alaska?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we had all of our restrictions lifted back in April, May of last year. And so we've been trying to get folks up there. We have a pretty good vaccination rate. We led the nation for quite some time in that. And it's open for business, and we're recruiting people to come and see Alaska.
Now, I'm going to ask you about federalism in a second, but I've been wondering. I remember from Alaska that the native peoples are sometimes remote. How are you getting vaccines to them?
Every method possible. We have one of the highest vaccine rates in the nation with regard to our Native Alaskans. And Native Alaskans constitute 15% of our overall population. So we have the highest rate of Native people in terms of population per capita. And so in 1918, we got hit pretty hard with the Spanish flu.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, our Native population got hit harder than any other place on the planet except for Samoa. And so we were very cognizant of that when this virus hit. And so we have a pretty good health system in terms of delivery of the vaccines, and our tribal health organizations did a fantastic job. And so the vast majority of our Native Alaskans are vaccinated, the vast majority of our elders are, and the vast majority of our most vulnerable are. So our death rates are second lowest only to our Vermont, and our hospitalization rates are in the low teens now. So we're doing great.
An old college friend, Dr. Will Saltonstall, who is up there flying around in a little plane, and it's all medical care by plane, right?
Right.
Bush plane. So I'm amazed that you've got that done. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Now I want to know. I've asked every governor. I'm going to ask you: is federalism going away? Is it? Are they?
Looks like it.
Now expand on that, because I know it's the state in which the federal footprint is the largest.
Well, I mean, we're supposed to be 50 sovereign states within the union, and that's what federalism is all about. And the whole idea of federalism is that states chart their own course within the union, within the powers delegated to the federal government, and that's it. But what's happening, and a lot of it's through the appropriation process, but there's other methods as well, is that dictates from Washington are coming fast and furious, and it's almost hard to keep up with them. So, in answer to your question, I would say yes, and it's fascinating. I'll just be very brief on this. Nashville is where James K. Polk is interned, one of the presidents. And he wrote a fascinating letter, a veto letter to the House of Representatives in August of 1846, in which he outlines why he's vetoing the Ports and Harbors Bill, because he felt that federal overreach at the time, that was going to be the camel's head in the tent, and we'd never see the end of it. And it's pretty appropriate for today.
I did not know that, and I study federalism pretty well, and I only know Polk because of the Mexican War. But I am convinced that the Supreme Court, this Supreme Court, is the most 10th Amendment-oriented Supreme Court in my lifetime. Are you litigating the cases you need to litigate to get control of the state?
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, we were dealing with an issue that has been ongoing since 1959, for example, and that's Alaska's sovereignty over its own submerged lands and waters, lakes and rivers, that were given to us in our Statehood Act. The federal agencies, especially the U.S. Park Service, never really wanted to accept that. So even up until last year, we were having Alaskans cited for using our own lakes and waters under federal the federal agencies thought it was still under their jurisdiction. So we came out about 2 months ago and we said that's the end of that. We will intervene on our citizens' behalf. We will do whatever it takes to exert our sovereignty, our true sovereignty over this, and you guys need to stop this. So that's an example, but also our ability to develop our own oil and gas, in Alaska. Not just, we have lots of federal land in Alaska. About 63% of the land is federal land. There's still a lot of oil and gas on some of that land, but there was always an understanding that there would be certain parts of Alaska that were under federal jurisdiction that we could develop for oil and gas. ANWR, for example, we had a lease sale under the Trump administration, and the Biden administration has decided to suspend that for review, and offshore oil as well. And so what's interesting is, just at a time when technology is unleashing oil and gas for the world and lowering prices, which makes it affordable for poor people, we're now being dictated by Washington that this is no longer going to happen. It's going to be a social engineering plan in which we get rid of oil and gas and substitute it for higher cost renewables.
And we are also disadvantaging the United States in the global competition with China when we do not become energy independent and allow other countries of the world to become energy dependent on the United States as opposed to the CCP or other bad actors.
Yes.
So you obviously are animated by federalism. How much do you think the average American gets that we are 50 sovereign states within a federal union?
I think it's fading. It's been fading for some time. I think it's something that's not really taught in the schools. So I think for just a dwindling handful of us, it still is a concept that we believe is at the heart of this country. The 13 colonies, when they became states, they ratified the Constitution. And there was a system set up to bring other states in from Western lands, but nonetheless, it was a federal system by which the states themselves would be sovereign, again, within a union for defense, a union for dealing with foreign affairs, et cetera. But as we see, just about every aspect of our life right now is being dictated from Washington. And quite frankly, if we don't stop it, stand up to it, it's just going to accelerate.
Last question, Governor, because I asked the callers yesterday what they wanted me to ask the governors about. Many of them wanted me to ask about election integrity. Now, I don't actually think I've heard of any problems in Alaska at all. But what do you think of your system up there?
I think all the systems need to be reviewed in light of what occurred in the last election, if only for the purpose of assuring citizens that every vote counts, that their vote counts. And so we've done a review of our election. There's been an election law introduced by Senator Mike Shower, and we're looking at where we can tighten things up if necessary. But Alaska escapes some of the issues that we saw down here in the lower 48. Nonetheless, that pandemic has exposed some weaknesses. For example, the Constitution calls for the legislatures to decide how elections are going to take place. But in some states, courts, Secretary of States, Lieutenant Governors made those decisions. And so that's really at the heart of, I think, a lot of what's being discussed, as well as concerns about certain electronics and how the votes were tabulated.
Governor, good to see you. Thank you for joining the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'll see you back in Alaska or back at the next RGA. Thank
Sounds
you for
good,
being here
Hugh.
this morning.
Sounds good. Thank you.